Hey there, guys. I hope everyone is having a great time because we're going to have a great time here at It's a Diaz Thing. So, welcome back to our podcast. Today, we have a really interesting episode here with our friend David, which I just met a couple of minutes ago. So, we're very excited to have this real and raw conversation on his experience as a missionary. But first, we're going to get to know him a little better. So, Janet, do you have some questions for him?
Yes, we do have questions for David. Just before we start, I just want to let you guys know how I met David. So, our church, for the longest time, we were in another building, and finally, we bought a new property that hopefully soon we'll have our own church, but we're working towards that. But our English church, also in the same city, was so gracious enough to let us stay in one of their buildings that they have there, and so we made that connection with David. He is a very friendly, funny, and amazing guy. Every time I talk to him, I learn so much. Like, how do you do all these things? Like, how does this even work? And I ask a lot of questions, and that's why he's here. Recently in our youth program, we had him. He shared with us very interesting stories about his missionary trips and things he does. And I was like, you know what, we have a podcast, why don't you come over here and share all these amazing stories with us, and we would like to hear all of that. So thank you, David, for accepting the invitation of being here with us. And I know we're all busy. I know I'm super swamped, but I know we all have jobs and we're busy, but making time for this, we really appreciate that. And so we have a couple of questions for you today. But before that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I already said a little bit, but tell us a little bit about, who you are, what you do, where you've been, and, before we start into the interview.
Cool. Well, it's really nice to be here, and thanks for the invitation. And I, I really don't know what to say when people say, "Tell us who you are," because people are complicated, and I'm no exception.
Yeah,
However, I was born at a very early age, as most people are,
That's great.
um, in the back of a single-wide mobile home on Roller Coaster Avenue in Tucson, Arizona.
oh,
Oh, I did not know that. You see, I'm
so
learning too.
so I was born to very very religious parents. Had one older brother at the time, and my father did. He was a swimming pool maintenance guy, and he worked with a gentleman who, interestingly enough, I just went to his 100th year birthday out in California. So
oh wow.
there's
Oh, wow.
it's I mean, literally, this guy has been old my whole life because
Wow.
I'm turning 50 this year, and so he was literally my age when I was born. So
Oh.
anyway,
Well,
um,
you do not look 50.
Yeah,
oh well, because I'm not.
true.
Well, you don't even look close to that age.
So so one thing that's bringing the reality of that home to me recently is when I see pictures or photos of the back of my head and it's completely white. Like, I've got a little brown up here, and this is what I see in the mirror. It's completely white on the back. Um, yeah, so my parents, they really wanted to make sure that their kids were raised properly. This was back in the 70s, and they felt like they needed to raise their kids out in the country instead of in the city. And so when I was little, we moved to a farm out in Colorado. And then shortly after that, my father started doing contract work for the Forest Service. The United States Forest Service basically is part of a division of the federal government that manages national forests,
Mhm.
and they have projects that they get private contractors to do. And so my dad did some of those. So I lived in the woods. We traveled in travel trailers. My mom homeschooled us. Went from
Mm.
one national forest to the other. And when I was a teenager, I noticed something interesting going on. A lot of my friends really, really were going after the world with a passion. And that bothered me and intrigued me all at the same time. They were getting into listening to bad music and, bragging about how horrible or how raunchy the music was. And I thought, I wonder why this is. What is it that makes a young person go from being raised in a conservative Christian home to just going after the world with a passion? So after I graduated community college in Utah, somebody let me know about a program that was being offered out in Virginia. It was a high school teacher program at a place called Heartland College. And I thought, well, that sounds like a worthy endeavor. So I went there and I got my high school teaching degree and started working at Oklahoma Academy. And I taught there for 13 years before moving down to Texas. And I think, Janet, the first time I met you and Giselle was in a pre-meeting for the family festival.
Yes.
That we had going on. And I still actually have one of those t-shirts. I don't know if you guys I don't know who all got t-shirts. I heard there was a shortage on t-shirts.
Oh, no.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't get mine.
Oh, no.
No, I didn't. It was really neat. And somebody brought a big flatbed trailer and we had a concert up on there, and we had a lot of music, awesome. And Isis was on there. But anyway, working at Oklahoma Academy gave me a lot of opportunities as far as taking the senior class on their senior trip. We did, my wife and I were the sponsors for, I think, 3 of those trips. Other than that, I've not really gone overseas for mission trips, but I have, and interesting you bring up about COVID, that Janet and I were talking about the podcast before we went on the air about COVID starting something. I myself, and I've talked to a lot of people, during COVID was a very real religious awakening for me and for others. Wow. And things that we have got started. Like, I remember when our church said, okay, we're closing the doors because somebody showed up with COVID, immediately I had seen a friend of mine who would get on Facebook and do live stuff. Like, he would go praying door to door in his neighborhood. And even though he had Adventist influences, actually he went to Oklahoma Academy. He wasn't a practicing Adventist, although he was going to church. But he would go pray with people just on the street. And I thought, boy, I didn't even know you could do that. And so he inspired me to just, as soon as I realized the doors were shut, immediately, boom, I'm on Facebook. I'm doing a church service live and inviting people to that. And even now on Friday evenings, whenever I can, which is usually most Fridays, I still do a Friday evening Vespers where people can pick hymn numbers. And then I do a Bible. We sing for about 15 minutes, and then I do a Bible talk for about 15 minutes. Yeah.
So that's
by the way, he also plays the piano very, very beautifully.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes.
I tell you, the piano is something that I fell in love with when I was really, really young. And actually, the guy that turned 100, his son, when I was a kid, he was a teenager. And boy, he just knew how to tickle those ivories. And it just made me have a passion to play the piano. But remember, I was in the woods living in a travel trailer. We couldn't have a piano.
Yeah.
And so that passion to play just festered for years. And so whenever I had an opportunity, boy, I tell you. So really, I'd never practiced the piano. Like most people have to discipline themselves and sit down and practice. I don't have that kind of discipline. And my mom never made me have that kind of discipline. But what we did do is this. My mom always made sure we had morning and evening worship in our family. And she always insisted that everybody pick a song. And so we did. And my dad bought us this little toy Casio keyboard from Radio Shack. I don't even know if you guys know what Radio Shack is.
Yes, we do.
So I started playing the hymns on there and just reading the notes. My mom showed me that note goes to this key and so on and so forth. So it was one finger at a time for, I don't know, a couple years. And then I expanded that to 2 fingers. And then my dad, when I was 15 years old, he got us a 5-octave Casio keyboard, full-size keys. And so I started adding another hand, and it's just been, well, what's 15 from take away 50 is about 35 years of playing the piano.
That's crazy.
So anyway, that I don't practice. Like, my practice is at church.
Yeah. But that's the best, because that's, that shows that it's a passion. And if you sit there and practice, at least for me, if I sit there and practice, it takes away the fun.
It does, doesn't it? And I think that's kind of touches a little bit on missions a little bit, because here's the thing. I have a theory, and I don't know. You guys help me out with it. Mm-hmm. I don't like going to church if I'm not involved. Like, if the only purpose of going
preach,
to church,
brother, preach.
If the only reason I'm going to church is to sit in a pew, wait for everybody to do their thing, and then quietly leave, I feel like I've missed so much. Mm-hmm. And so I, that's just me. I know some people, they really enjoy the church program, and so that's all they want to do is just go and sit and let people present, and then they go home. That's fine. But I don't know. I couldn't do it. My poor wife, I interact with the pastor. So, like, the pastor is saying something, I'm like, oh, amen. Yes, absolutely. I'm interacting vocally with the pastor. And this last Sabbath, she was this close from telling me, this isn't your sermon, you need to be quiet. And then the pastor invited me up front.
Oh, wow.
You're like, actually.
So anyway, that's just a little bit about me. I look for ways to help. One of the most interesting things, at least I find interesting, that I've started doing recently is I've gotten involved with a group called Gideon Rescue Company. They're a group of men and women, boys and girls, who, when disaster strikes, they go and they help in whatever capacity that is. Just in the last week, we had teams in Michigan for the ice storm, helping clear driveways, taking trees off rooftops, tarping roofs. There were teams in Arkansas because of the tornadoes, Tennessee because of the tornadoes, had a team heading toward Myanmar. I don't think they've made it yet. They landed in Thailand, but they've been working with the Karen refugee and refugee camps, and also the orphanages. And then we have a team, oh my goodness, this is crazy, in Russia right now. I think they've only been arrested 3 times.
Wow.
But here's why they wanted to go to Russia so badly. They felt God's calling there. Is they've been going to the front lines in Ukraine several times, and they know, just like there's thousands of Ukrainians dying every day. They know the same thing's happening on the Russia side of the border, and they wanted to go over there and give hope to the guys over there too. Mm-hmm. They have what's called God Pods from AWR, Adventist World Radio, and they give those out to the soldiers, and they say, "Hey, we know what you're doing is an impossible task. You're probably going to die, but God loves you, and here's hope. Listen to this."
Yeah. Well, that's amazing.
So anyway, we're praying furiously for them and the team trying to get to Myanmar. It's just, the Myanmar, it was a terrible earthquake for hundreds of miles. There's just devastation from the powerful earthquake, and so they were trying to get over there. But the Lord knows, and that's the thing about mission work, is you have to be flexible, right? Like, you might have something in mind. You might think, well, this is the program. This is what we're going to do. We're going to drive here, and we're going to spend the night at this church, and then we're going to do this task, and then the next day we're going to go over here, and we're going to, right? You want to have this schedule planned out. When you go on a mission trip, that whole plan you have may just have to go out the window because God may have something entirely different. As I dramatically found out when I went down to help with Hurricane Milton last year.
And who makes those calls? Is it usually the leader who decides, like, I feel a strong call this other way, or I feel God is calling me to that we need to do something different? Or is it just obvious
Yeah.
to the group?
Yeah. So sometimes it's really obvious. Like, okay, so I will tell you about the experience with Hurricane Milton.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew that Hurricane Milton was a Category 5, and it was looming and fixing to land on the western coast of the Florida Panhandle. And so, knowing that, we knew there was going to be tremendous need. Whenever you know there's a large need, you know that that's an opportunity to witness and help people. And so, knowing that, praying about it, um, I was very inspired to go. I was trying to go to another response to Hurricane Helene and the impact up in Carolinas, but that was falling through, and so it opened up that two guys, Brock and Dylan, they were heading to Florida for hurricane, the other hurricane, and I said, "Well, can I come with?" They're like, "Yeah, come on." So I said, "Sure. What tickets are you buying? I'll fly with you." And they told me what tickets they bought. I bought a ticket too, and started driving to the DFW airport. They're from Ardmore. They started driving south to the DFW airport.
Mm.
We didn't know how we were driving out of the airport because they weren't renting cars anymore because the hurricane that was coming. They didn't want their rental cars out in the hurricane, right? We didn't have a place to stay. We didn't know where we were eating, right? I mean, there was no logistics. It's like, okay, here's a huge need. God needs people there in place to help people in need. So we said, yeah, we'll go. So off we go. Well, before we even get to the airport, Brock gets a phone call from a pastor that he hadn't heard from in years. And he's like, hey, this is Pastor so-and-so. Would Gideon Rescue happen to be responding to this hurricane by any chance? And Brock's like, actually, we're driving to the airport right now. He's like, oh, sweet. Do you guys need anything? And Brock's like, well, we don't have a car. We don't have a place to stay. He's like, I don't know if that's anything that you can help us with. He's like, I'll call you right back. Pastor called him back. So before we even land in Florida, God had provided us a car for the time we were there, a place to stay, and it was with the head deacon of the church in that area. And all he needed was help boarding up his windows for the hurricane. And before we even get to Florida, check this out. God provided everything. Our first mission, right? We didn't know exactly what it was that we were going to do, but we had our first mission. We had a car. We had a place to stay. We had meals. It was just beautiful how God just opened up these doors, and it was so obvious that God opened the doors.
Wow.
Well, what's fascinating, you asked, well, how do you know whether, God is changing directions? Is it an impression or whatnot? So the next day, as I'm helping Charlie board up his windows, Brock and Dylan head into town to make contact with the local fire departments, the emergency care response centers, and whatnot. Brock gets a phone call from the guy who was in charge of the emergency operations there in that area. And he said, let me be very clear. We didn't ask you to come. We don't want you here. If I find you in my county, I will have law enforcement escort you out.
Oh, my.
Wow.
So that was a closed door.
Very clear that it was a closed door.
But you can see how that it could, if you're not like just relying on the Lord and saying, okay, Lord, this is all up to you. If you're thinking, this is something you had to create, then it's going to be very confusing. It's like, but Lord, you opened the door. You gave us a car. You gave us a place to stay. You gave us everything. You opened the door. How can you let it shut like this? Well, so what it is sometimes the Lord opens doors to position you in a place that otherwise you would not have been, so that he can take you from there somewhere else, right? It's kind of like, I give this analogy. It's kind of like the Israelites had a miraculous leaving out of Egypt to get to the Red Sea. And a lot of them panicked. They're like, Lord, you brought us just to kill us here in front of the Red Sea? It's like, no, I brought you to the Red Sea because I'm going to open it and I'm going to take you to the other side. But he didn't even take them to the other side because that's where they were going to stay, right? Yeah. He opened the Red Sea and took them there, but he wasn't going to leave them there either. He continued was leading them to the promised land. So we realized, okay, so if the doors are closed here, the doors are open somewhere else. So let's go find them. And Charlie was so gracious. He drove us down south toward where the eye of the storm was so that we could find people that were in even greater need. And mind you, these two boys I was with, Brock and Dylan, these are two of the guys that are over in Russia right now, by the way.
Oh, wow.
They have swiftwater rescue training. They had their rescue helmets. I mean, we were ready to do some serious rescuing, right? Snatch people out of a river, ride on the nose of an inflatable boat, whatever. Drop out of a helicopter. We didn't care. We weren't going to tell God how we had to do the rescues, but we were there to do some rescuing. And we didn't do any rescuing because the hurricane ended up dissolving before it made landfall, which was a miracle.
Yeah.
So anyway, we head south and we go to the emergency center there, tell them who we are. We're there to help if they need any help. They're like, all right, thanks. They took our names, phone number, and they were busy because they had this huge emergency they were getting ready for. So we go over to the airport that had been taken over by the sheriff's department because that was where they were going to be operating their emergency responses from. So we stopped there. Charlie and I were praying like crazy. Lord, give favor in the eyes of whoever's in charge here to Brock and Dylan. And we finished praying, and they weren't back yet, so we prayed again. And before we were even done with our second prayer, Brock and Dylan show up, and they're like, okay, Nikki is the sheriff who's in charge of the operation here, and she's excited we're here. She's given us the entire luggage claim area to stage in. It's like, oh, wow, the Lord is opening a door again. And it's like, well, now it makes sense why the door closed farther north in the other area, because he had us placed for us here. And so it was awesome. It was good. We kind of laid our stuff out, ate some food. We're like, okay, Lord, what do you have next for us? We're ready. Called our families, let them know we were okay, what we were planning on doing, that everything looked good for the hurricane. And less than an hour later, Nikki comes up and she's like, I'm so sorry, you guys can't stay here.
No.
She's like, but she said, I have a sheriff deputy who has a Suburban, and he can drive you guys over to a storm shelter. They need help over there. Now, this storm shelter was a middle school that there's a regular middle school that they were using as an emergency shelter to shelter about 2,500 people in. Oh. And so they drove us over there, and we immediately start helping any way we can. They needed chairs set up, so we started setting up chairs. They needed the very unpleasant task of going room to room and letting the very crowded rooms know that more people were coming. They were going to have to scoot over, and they couldn't sprawl out as much as they were, So we were, and it's like, we're like, this is amazing. Nobody wants to give people bad news, right? But this put us in front of people. So it allowed us to pray with every single room in that school with 2,500 people. We're praying with every single room, and we're asking for prayer requests. We're like, is it okay if we pray with you guys? And they're like, oh, yes, please. Thank you so much. And so there we are. We're going room to room praying with people, giving the unpleasant news. There's more people coming, but and these are your new neighbors. Be as friendly as you can to each other. If somebody needs help, could you please help each other? Just general encouraging stuff and letting people know that we had faith that God was in control, which faith is contagious. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it was amazing. So that whole evening, that whole day, and then that whole evening, we're praying with people. I started doing something that I felt a little uncomfortable with because I just wasn't used to doing it. But I was in the cafeteria where they had a lot of the disabled people on cots. And I was going from person to person, talking to them, listening to their stories, asking them if they had anything they wanted me to pray for, if it was okay if I prayed with them, giving them little glow tracts. And I only had 2 people that said they didn't want to have prayer. So, I mean, disaster response is a perfect place if you want to witness to people, if you want to help people. It's a perfect place to do that. And so I prayed for a couple hours with different people at their cots on their bedside, and just it was amazing. It was amazing just leading people in prayer and praying and thanking God for his protection. And as I was leaving the cafeteria, I went out the double doors, and something caught my attention, and I was staying there for a second, and this elderly lady came out that I hadn't seen, and short little lady, and she said, "Can I have a prayer?" And I said, "Of course you can have a prayer." I said, "What's your name?" And she said, "My name's Immaculate, just like the conception of my Lord Jesus."
Oh.
And she looked at me and she said, "Oh, you look just like him." I said, "Well, I do love Jesus very much." I said, "But I'm not Jesus."
No. Wow.
And so I prayed. I knelt down, and she was barely taller than me, even though I was kneeling down. I held her hands, and I knelt down and I prayed. I said, "Lord, thank you so much for bringing Immaculate to this shelter. And thank you for being the shelter in all of our storms of life." And when I was done praying, she said, "Can I pray?" I said, "Sure. Of course you can." And she said, "Lord, thank you for bringing these 4 men from Gideon Rescue Company," which there were only 3 of us.
Ooh.
But if she saw 4, I don't know. I was like, "Lord, are you here somewhere and I didn't see you?" Oh, so anyway, yeah. So after the next morning, I went outside to see the tremendous destruction that this massive hurricane was going to work on the area. And I found a couple sticks that had fallen down in the parking lot. No broken glass, no flipped cars. The trees were still standing, no broken windows on the buildings. And I'm telling you, when we prayed with the people that the Lord would stop the storm, we have a screenshot of the radar that at first we thought was just a glitch, because you see the storm circling around, and then it looks like it's just cut off. And it's like, well, that looks like just maybe an artifact or something weird. But that's what happened. Like, we didn't get hit with those winds. It was so amazing. And so the next day there was nothing. We went back to the airport to see if there was anything else the other rescue guys were doing. The National Guard was there. They had nothing going on. Like, I think couple hours after we were there, they got a radio call to go look at what looked like an abandoned sailboat just bobbing out in the ocean. It probably got, ripped off a dock from somewhere. There was Task Force 1 out of Arkansas. They had nothing going on. There were 2 Black Hawk helicopters from the Florida National Guard. They had nothing going on. I mean, literally, that's how incredible the Lord spared, and his mercy for sparing that area was. Wow. There was no rescuing that needed to be done. And so we realized, we thought we were going there to be snatching people out of raging waters or flooding houses. And God had this shelter of 2,000 people he needed us to pray with. And so when I say missions can change, and you have to be flexible and just be obedient, to God, and say, "Lord, whatever your leading is, that's what we're going to do." And it doesn't have to be something fancy or flashy or anything. Wheeling an old person in a wheelchair to use the bathroom, that's not glamorous. That's not something that you take pictures of and put on Facebook. "Hey, rolling to the restroom with my homie," right? I mean, no, it's not. It's not that. He's like, "I need willing servants who will serve in any capacity."
Exactly.
And that doesn't have to be overseas. That can be here, wherever you are.
I think it's interesting that you said that you were expecting to be fishing people out of, a certain place or whatever, but you actually were not fishers. You actually were like fishers of men, if you see
right, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's crazy because we when we ask for something from God, we want this to be, this exciting, amazing
Right.
story of,
Right.
like I did this, or
Right.
God did this for me, or whatever. But in reality, when we take God out of the picture, that's when our mind starts going off. We had a similar experience actually this past week with Evelyn because, uh, social media is a monster that
Mm-hmm.
keeps
Mm-hmm.
changing and changing and changing. So we were a little worried, to see, is this what we're doing making a difference? Is it impacting
Mm-hmm.
people's lives? Should we keep doing it? Like what
Yeah.
is happening?
What is our focus?
Yeah, yeah. And so what changes do we have to do? And I told Evelyn, we're forgetting, the most important part of this, because
Mm-hmm.
we need to learn that it is God that takes this, not us.
Yeah.
It's not because, oh, we are really good speakers or conversation goers, or
Right.
we
Right.
bring great guests. No, it's about God, because maybe the numbers don't look right, or maybe the views are not high, or the likes are not there, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, God is going to bring these topics to the people that need to hear it.
That's right.
And we're
That's right.
forgetting about that part,
That's right.
because it's not up to us. In your
Right.
case, you guys were like looking for something specific, but God was like, no, I don't need you to do that. I need you over here because there's a need over here. And I
Right.
will place you where there's a need. And so we have to remember that every time we do any type of mission work, you said it, like local or in another country, in another place, we can't take God out of the picture, because at the end of the day, we have to be flexible to say, okay, God, yes, I will do what you say, whether it is wheeling out somebody from the restroom, or whether it is, like serving or helping or bringing a smile to someone.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
simple as that, we need to learn to be flexible, and sometimes our ego can interfere with those things. So it's amazing that you guys were willing to say, okay, we're here to serve in whatever capacity, but we're here to serve.
And what I have to point out is I thought I went prepared. I really did. I took gloves. I took leather gloves.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
took. I'm a chainsaw operator also, because that's one of the skills that I learned with my father in forestry work. So
Mm.
I wasn't able to take my chainsaw on the plane, but I took my hard hat. I took my
Yeah.
chaps. Those make it so that you don't accidentally cut your leg when you're running the chainsaw.
Oh yeah.
So I had my hard hat, my earmuffs, my chaps, my gloves. I knew there were going to be a lot of tree branches that needed to be cut up and whatnot. And
Mm-hmm.
I was going to be ready. I had my boots, my pants, my shirt, everything. I had everything ready to respond to the mission as I imagined that
Mm-hmm.
it was going to be. And really, the one piece of equipment that ended up being super valuable were the extra pair of knee pads that I bought for my uniform pants, because I spent a lot of time on that cold concrete floor, right? And
Wow.
so you just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I've noticed about mission work, and I don't know if this is going to be meaningful to any of your listeners, but it
Yeah.
was really meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm.
Have you guys ever watched the movie or the video or read the book called The Pineapple Story?
No.
It was a Dutch missionary who went overseas, and he he established a mission. And boy, the locals were so annoying, and he was so angry and so aggravated at the locals because he loved pineapples, and he tried planting pineapples, and just before the pineapples would be ripe,
Mm-hmm.
the natives would steal them all. And so he was so frustrated and so angry. And he's like, "What's wrong with you guys?" And they'd come and they'd steal everything from the clinics, and they'd even steal the babies' diaper pins. And the women would come up asking if they could have something, and there they would be wearing the diaper pins for earrings, and
Wow.
they were just thieves, and he was just so angry, and and he's like, "Lord, I'd be a great missionary if it wasn't for these natives." And and
Wow.
and uh, and the Lord really worked on that man's heart. And he realized, you know what? These aren't his pineapples. They're the Lord's pineapples anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so he completely surrendered everything. He's like, okay, Lord, I surrender everything to you. Nothing is mine. It's all yours. You're going to have to protect it. I don't know why we as humans feel like we have to tell God what to do with his things. But anyway, we do. And so he told the natives, it's like, those are God's pineapples. And they're like, what? I thought they were yours. He's like, no, I gave them to God. Well, that kind of made them scratch their head a little bit because they're thinking, well, we don't want to steal God's stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
But
nobody wants to do that.
but somebody ended up stealing all the pineapples, and he wasn't angry about it. And the natives said to him, you must be a Christian now. And so that's what I'm saying with all of that is wherever you go, guess what? You're there. You find yourself there. And if you are irritable, if you get annoyed, get angry, if you're selfish, if you look out for number one, all of these things that we as humans struggle with, if you're in the mission field, you're going to bring that with you. But if you're generous and you're willing to give and you have a heart of love and you're gracious and you're kind and you're sympathetic and you're understanding, you're going to take that to the mission field too. And one of the best places to actually start surrendering to the Lord and asking him for kindness, graciousness, forgiveness is in the home. Because if you can be kind and gracious, and when somebody snaps and says something irritable to you, you can respond with kindness or not respond at all. I mean, that's great training to go to the mission field, because you are going to be hungry. You're going to be tired. Your buttons are going to get pushed. And, what kind of missionary do you want to be? I think we all want to reflect Christ, but sometimes we're not willing to let self die in such a way that we're able to do that.
Wow. That's true. Being a missionary starts where you're at, It doesn't start overseas. It doesn't start in another miles away, but it starts in where you're at. I love that. I love that. We're going to go on a break right now, and we're going to come back. We have a little more. We're intrigued on some of the things about you, David. And we have a couple of more questions for you, but we'll be back after this break.
This world's fast falling apart. We're seeing disaster on every hand.
Heavenly Father, please help us.
This was the only way out for some who found they were surrounded by surging torrents.
Pray for us! We are right at it!
And the window of avoiding catastrophic outcomes is closing.
And one of the biggest lessons that we've learned in disaster response has been what's most important to God. What's on his heart? What's on his mind? And the answer is simple. Because God cares for people. He cares for you. He cares for me. And he cares for all other people, every nation, every kindred, every tongue, every tribe around this globe, especially when people find themselves in their darkest days.
These wonderful people showed up on my door to help with the storm damage. They heard the story of my wife Jane and I losing our son July 30th to suicide. It's our second son in 3 years. I don't know what I'd do without him, because I know I couldn't get this done myself. And this world's not all bad.
How do we reach people in their greatest hour of need? And to accomplish this goal, it's been amazing. God has never disappointed us. He has poured out every resource. He has pulled every stop. He has given us every opportunity to reach people. Speed is of the essence. Why? Because time is running out.
You can also be a rescue missionary. If you feel that God is calling you, visit them at GideonRescue.org and become a volunteer. Once again, GideonRescue.org.
And we are back with a little bit more. Thank you so much, David, because those stories, even though I already heard it once, it's like every time I hear it, I'm like, God is so good. Evelyn had to leave, but she was sharing something on the break, and she was saying something that is very true. Unfortunately, there are everything in life has a good and a bad, the good and the bad. And unfortunately, there's people that don't have their heart in a mission. Some students just want to travel, just want to go and see other places. But I really liked what you said about you have to prepare here now in your home. You have to prepare your heart. I haven't had the privilege to be a missionary in another place. Hopefully one day I have the opportunity to do something like that. I'll be open to that. But I was a canvasser and a comporter.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And for me, that impacted my life in a way that it changed completely the perspective. It was a 360 change for me, because I thought, because I was born in the church, like all my life I've been in the church, and I thought, I'm like, I'm good with God, I know my stuff, I know my Bible, I'm good. But the moment I went as a canvasser, and I knocked on that first door, I was like, I don't know anything. It's a humbling experience. And so you go back to where you're staying, to the church or to the place you're staying, and you're like, I need to study scripture. I need to know my stuff, because I need to prepare, because this cannot happen to me again. So I'm sure you've experienced that. How has the missionary field or the missions that you've done change your spiritual life? You've mentioned a little bit here and there, but how would you say it has impacted or changed how you view God, of how you view him now?
So I don't want to say that when somebody goes on a mission trip that it can't make them a better person. Like, you have to be the better person before you go, because every encounter you have with God has the opportunity for making you a better person. And of course, it's how you relate to it. But anytime you experience a situation where you're like, that had to be God, like you try to make the connections. You're like, okay, if we were to say that was random, of all the random things that could happen, how could it be that one? And just one more story from Hurricane Milton, to illustrate this point, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we decided that we were going to go ahead and exit Florida out of the name just slipped my mind. Anyway, town south of where we were. So one of the elders of the local church said, yeah, I'd be glad to drive us down to where we were going to spend the night. And where we were going to spend the night was at a friend's place that was a vacation home in a really expensive neighborhood. And so as we're driving in, we go to the guard gate and we tell them, this is who we are, this is where we're staying, we should be on your list. They look, they're like, yep, okay, you check off. So they open the gate and we go into this beautiful, it's like paradise, palm trees and manicured lawns and walking trails and beautiful homes. And we get to the section where we're going to be staying, and it's kind of a bunch of condos. So it's like upstairs apartments and downstairs apartments and stacked on top of each other and in a long row. But it's still just gorgeous. And as we pull up, one of the neighbors comes out and they're like, you're not going to be able to get in your garage because the electricity just went out. And they're like, well, the car's not staying. But us three guys are staying. They're like, okay, well, the electricity just went out. It should come back on soon, and it shouldn't be a problem. And we're like, it's no problem. I mean, we're three guys. We just spent the night on a cold concrete floor the night before, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, all of our cell phones are starting to die because they need to be charged. So that's a little inconvenient, right? Because our cell phones aren't being able to charge, but we're like, okay, the electricity will be on by morning. So, well, in the middle of the night, I'm hearing this arguing coming from next door. This couple are shouting at each other.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, oh, man. I'm like, can you imagine living in paradise but not having paradise in your heart? Oh, what a tragedy.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, well, in the morning, I'm going to go introduce myself and see if, I can talk to them and at least, give some encouragement or something to them. And I wake up, I'm doing my devotions, and in walks Dylan, fully dressed. It's like, dude, where were you? He's like, oh, I was next door where the couple were arguing. I was helping them get their generator running. Because, the electricity still wasn't on. And people with their refrigerators and freezers, they're trying to start generators so that their food doesn't go bad.
Yeah.
And so he helped them get their generator going. He said, and they've offered to take us to the airport.
Ooh.
It's like, oh, wow, that is so cool. And he had given them a great controversy. And I mean, it was just like, Dylan, you're on fire.
Good job. Good job.
So we get ready to go. And it was the missus that was going to drive us. And so we load all of mostly my bags. See, I had very little faith on this trip. So I loaded 2 humongous bags full of stuff. I had a big backpack and a personal item. I mean, I took everything I possibly could.
Yeah.
I took way too much. So anyway, mostly my stuff. But anyway, the guys were patient with me. They knew it was my first trip. And
they're like, poor thing.
he'll learn.
He'll learn, yeah.
So anyway, we're leaving the community. We hadn't even passed the guard station in leaving the community, and her phone rings, and her husband says, honey, don't worry about putting gas in the gas can. The electricity just came back on. And I turned to Sharon. I said, Sharon, do you see what just happened? She's like, what? I said, if the electricity hadn't gone out, we would have never met you. Think about this. This was not a hurricane affected part of Florida. It was just some sort of a fluke, random electric outage that was in just one part. It wasn't even that whole community. It was just the few houses we were in around. Like just that one little spot was affected by an electrical outage only while we were there. That's it. It had just gone out just before we got there, and it came back on just as we were leaving. Yeah. And so I said, God set this up. And she shared how she felt like God had led in other times in her life. And we were able to give her a great controversy as she was explaining that she was concerned about how the federal government was trying to regulate morality. And she's like, as a believer, she said, that's my job, is to try to convince people that God's ways are better. She said, that's not the government's job at all. And so Dylan, he's like, can I give you this book? Chapter 35 is Liberty of Conscience Threatened. He said, this is perfect for you. And she said, oh, I don't want to take your book. I was like, Sharon, could you please take his book? He wants to give it to you. She's like, I'll just buy it on Amazon. I was like, we have plenty of these. Could you please?
You really want to?
He's like, okay, I'll take your book. And she took a picture of us just as we were, she dropped us off at the airport. And then she texted a message to us. She said, I'm back home. I'm sitting on my back porch, and I'll finish my other book later. I'm going to start reading the book you gave me right now. And so as the three of us are walking to the airport, this was obviously something God had arranged. This was not something that we planned. We didn't set this up. This was something God set up, obviously. And I asked Dylan, I asked the guys, I'm like, when does it stop? Right? Because we're seeing God's leading one time after another in quick succession. And Dylan turns to me and he says, it doesn't stop unless you let it.
That's true.
God wants to keep moving. It's us that we go home, we're like, whew, mission's done. Okay, I don't have to worry about it now because I'm out of the mission field. I'm done. The mission's done. But it's not. We get to continue the mission. Like the thrill and the joy that you have of having experiences with God while you're canvassing, while you're maybe at disaster relief, you can have those day by day.
Yes.
For me, it's like the shield of fear that goes up. And it's like, I don't want to talk to them about the great controversy, or I don't want to talk to them about God, but we don't know which ones are open. Like God may have placed us in the presence of that person because he knew that person needed a Christian to reach out to them and touch them in a way that that they needed to be reached.
Yeah.
And yet in our disobedience, we're like, no, I'm going to zip my mouth shut and I'm just not going to say anything. So we have there's missions all around us. It's just that we're not always willing. At least, okay, I'm not always willing. I'm trying to get better at it. I want to be more obedient, because I'm realizing, like, all of these experiences that we have of these definite, like, this was God, right?
Yeah, of course.
Setting it up for us to meet Sharon. That can happen in everyday life.
Anywhere.
It doesn't just have to be there.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I feel that I've fallen into this, and I don't know, you tell me if that's something that we're talking about here, but we, like human beings in general, we're very stereotypical, and that doesn't help. And I think Satan uses that, because many times while I was canvassing, there was a saying in our group that says, skip a house, skip a blessing. And so we couldn't skip a house, because we knew if God was preparing that house for us, like, who are we to skip it?
Right.
And so, but many times I did not want to go into a house, because I was very stereotypical. You know, you see the typical people drinking beer, smoking, doing drugs, or all tattooed or whatever. You know, and you're like, they don't want to know about Jesus, you know, like really, these people are not going to want to hear me. They're going to reject me. They're going to whatever. And so, but even though I had that in my mind, I remember, skip a house, skip a blessing. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do it. And then, and I'm like, but okay, God, I have to, I'm here for this purpose. So I noticed a pattern while I was canvassing, that the people that were most like that were the ones that wanted to know more about God than the people that were more, you know, like eloquent or well-dressed or stuff. Those were the ones that were like, I don't want prayer.
And isn't that interesting? Because we're, I don't know about you, but for me, I'm a little more comfortable around perhaps somebody who's a little more well-to-do. You know, they have their stuff obviously have their stuff together. There's no tripping hazards walking up to the front door.
Yes. I know. And it is crazy, you know, because God is trying, I mean, at least in my experience, he was trying to tell me something. Not like the outside of people or the perception people give to you, not always is the way you think it is.
Right.
And we called them divine appointments when we had.
They are. You know, absolutely. You know, you're right.
And so every time I had that type of encounter, I had a divine appointment. You know, people that wanted to know more about Jesus, people that were hurt, that were going through terrible things, and that were like, you know, I was praying for someone to come. I was praying for a sign, and then you came, and you're that answered prayer, and you're like, imagine if I would have said, no, that person doesn't seem like they want to know about God, and then I went the other way. And I feel we still have that and carry that as a church.
No, I mean, that's just human nature, isn't it?
Yes.
And when you say that we have prejudice, just touching on that a little bit, my brain will tell me that, like you said, this person isn't somebody who would be interested in what I have to say. Isn't that arrogant, though?
Yes, it is.
I mean, how all-knowing and knowledgeable do you have to pretend to be able to know that person who you've never met in your life
exactly
doesn't want what you have?
Yeah.
Dylan called me the other day. He's like, oh, I've got to tell you what just happened. He was at a gas station, and there were some young people in a car that had their windows up, and they were smoking. They had music going, and he was impressed to give them some glow tracks, and that shield of fear went up in front of him. I mean, mind you, this is Dylan. This is the guy that I went with to Hurricane Milton, and he's one of the guys that's over in Russia right now, right? So you would think, oh, this guy's fearless now.
Yes.
No, he's just like us. He's just like us. He has those same inhibitions where it's like, no, they don't want it. And he felt that so strong, but he was obedient. And he went and they knocked on the window, ding, ding, ding.
Mm-hmm.
Boop. Hey guys, I want to bless you with this, and he gave it to them,
Yeah.
and they're like, okay. Doop. Window goes back up, and he goes and he finishes business, and then he forgot something, so he had to go back somewhere. And as he's going near their car, they come out and they're like, hey guy, do you have more of these? We want to give some of these to our friends.
Wow.
He's like, oh, absolutely, I do. And he's like, I also have this book called The Great Controversy that is really important for the time we live in right now. And they're like, oh, can we have one? I mean, right? So it's like we make stuff up. We imagine that somebody doesn't.
It's all here.
It
The head.
It is.
It's so bad. It's just terrible. But you're right when you say it's arrogant, because it's not us. It's not about us. Like serving in the church, being a missionary. All of this is not about us. At the end of the day, it's all about God. Right. It's not how well I speak or how knowledge I have about the Bible. That's
right.
And we forget that.
And having knowledge about the Bible is good. It's undeniable. And having skills that can help people where they have needs, that's undeniably good. But you don't have to have those to bless people.
No, you don't. And we think we do. And that's why it's like, I don't give Bible studies because I what if they ask me something I can't answer,
So we excuse ourselves, right? Yes. There's that parable. It's like, hey, the wedding feast is ready. It's like, well, I just bought some cows, so please have me excused. It's like we're so quick to excuse ourselves from what God wants. So quick. Yeah. And it's easy, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, do you want to be justifying yourself, or do you want Jesus to be justifying you?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because those excuses are not gonna. I mean, they're not gonna do anything at the end of the day.
Well, they're not going to do any good at the end of the day. And I don't want to say that they'll hurt us in the judgment, because they certainly won't, especially when we come to Jesus and he forgives us of all our sins, right? Yeah. So when we look back and we're like, oh, I should have talked to that person and I said no to the Holy Spirit. Oh my goodness, Lord, please forgive me. He does. He forgives us because he's that good. He forgives us.
Yes.
But there's a blessing that we're missing out on. And I think that when we get to heaven and I'm sitting around chatting with my guardian angel and my guardian angel and I are maybe reminiscing a little bit.
Yes.
And the angel will be like, well, you remember that one spot? Yeah. You could have had all of this. I could have had all of that. Yeah, but you didn't ask for it, and I was hoping you would, and we kept trying to prod you like, hey, there's this over here for you, and you kept insisting on saying no. It's like, oh, there's so much I could have, right? So anyway, there's a lot that the blood of Jesus has paid for, and I think we short ourselves, right? We short ourselves of the blessings, and I'm not good at it yet, but I have somewhat purposed in my heart. It's like, if there's something that the Lord has in store for me, I mean to have it. I purpose to have it. I don't want to get to heaven and have this warehouse full of blessings that my guardian angel said, this was yours. This was yours, and you didn't ask for it.
That's terrible. That's so terrible. Yes, you are right. We want to conclude with one more thing that I think we've mentioned some of it, but we want to leave this message with the people that are hearing this. We talked about service, and we talked about helping others, and if there is someone here that is like, I want to make that shift, my life has become more, and in this world, honestly, everything is about me, like if it affects me, how well I'm being, am I going to be good? We live in a world that people don't care about what the other one hurts or if it doesn't. And when you see like an action of care and somebody it's very, people are like, are you okay? Like people don't do that today. And so if somebody is listening today and saying, I want to shift from that mentality, how do I start?
Yeah.
What's the first step do I have to take? I want to, serve and be a volunteer, do something, but I don't know how. What would you advise?
Yeah. So wanting something like that is a good thing to want. And if you, anytime you want something good or desire something good, or you see somebody else wanting something good and desiring something good, you should nurture that. You should encourage that, and move forward with that. Now, as far as how do I start blessing people, you don't have to be a part of a program. You don't have to join some sort of an outfit or an official division of the church. It doesn't have to be a new initiative that the General Conference has put out. It's as simple as this, and this may be why a lot of people turn away, because it doesn't seem to glorify self, and it doesn't glorify self. That is, look for a need and pray about how God you can pray to God how you can fill that need, and move forward in doing that, whatever that need is. So as a kid, I was blind. As a child, I was blind to the needs of my parents. I was absolutely blind. I did the dishes because my mom made me do the dishes, right? If I swept the floor, it was because she told me to sweep the floor, right? I never looked to see if there was something that my mom needed, and then I'd be like, okay, well, I can do that, right?
Yeah.
So it takes getting our eyes off of what we're desiring, what we're pursuing, and just look, where is a need? As soon as you identify a need and you realize I can relieve that need, do it. You may get in trouble for it. And that's okay, right? I mean, obviously we don't want to be doing things that make life harder for everybody, but if you find a need, no matter how close it is to you, right? So like if you're a student, you're a dormitory student, look for a way to bless your roommate. Like, is there a need that they have? Like, well, I'm not into loaning the money. Well, you know what? If you have 50 cents and they need a parking meter and you got 50 cents to put in there, do it for them. Just be generous, right? If you have a roommate and they don't have a tie and you have two, and you have to go to a chapel service that requires a tie, loan them a tie, right? Be generous. Find a need and fill it. If you are if you're a child living at home, look for a way that you can a way that somebody needs help, either a sibling. Now, siblings are tough because I know the hard feel. Like I remember how the thought of doing something nice to one of my brothers was almost repulsive.
Oh no! Wow.
Right. But it's like do something nice for somebody to bless them. Your parents, right? One of the best things for a parent is to do what you know they're going to ask you to do before they ask you to do it, right? That's a blessing to them. That actually lifts a burden from them. Parents don't love going around yelling at their kids, telling them what to do. No. It's a burden on their soul. So if you do that, you'll lift the burden. You'll make life easier for your parents. That is mission service in the highest regard. Spouses, sometimes they argue about, well, this is the wife's job, it's not the husband's job, or the wife is like, this is the husband's job, it's not the wife's job. You know what? If there's a burden you can lift it. And we're all so tired, we're all so worn out, we don't have energy for this. But you know what? If we can lay self aside just a little bit, just lay self aside a little bit, you'll find a place to serve, and you won't have to go far. But the struggle is always between selfless act or selfishness, and it's the same principles between the principles of Satan and the principles of Christ. Christ's kingdom is one of selfless, loving service, and the principles of Lucifer is selfish acts of making things better for myself. It's two opposing principles.
Yeah.
And as we, Christ, I just encourage people, choose Christ's methods.
Oh yeah, they work better.
Oh yeah.
They work way better.
And Janet, it's not just about going to heaven. It's
No.
about making life actually better here now.
Yeah, of course. I like that. We have to start at home, because
Yeah.
many times we and I've heard stories, and I'm not judging anyone, but I've
Sure.
heard stories. I've heard stories about people that go and they give Bible studies, they go on mission trips, they do all these things, but they never take care of their family, or they're there for their family, or they
Right.
or they treat with love their family, or all of that. And I think it starts first at home, doing that service, providing those needs and filling those needs. It starts at home, because sometimes we forget about but our close-knit family that should come first, that being kind, talking to each other with love, it starts at home. Just because they're your parents, or they're somebody close to you, that doesn't mean that they don't get that side of you.
Right.
So before you go somewhere else, start at home, and then it's like a little cycle chain, like be and they'll share that with other people, and then more missionaries around the world. But it really starts at home. So be a missionary, a good missionary first at home, and then be a good missionary in another country, in another place. And
Can I give you a Bible text for somebody to look at that would be really good for looking at what involves being a missionary? Isaiah chapter 58.
Yeah.
And it talks about how that you delight in all these religious activities. You like to go to church. You like to come near to God. You bring all your offerings and your sacrifices. And God's like, you think this is what I want? This isn't what I want. So continue to read Isaiah chapter 58, because it goes on to clearly lay out exactly what it is that he wants. And, this is one of the things that I had to come to grips with while working at Oklahoma Academy, which is a mission school, is you can be working for Christ and not have Christ in your heart.
Yes.
And that is scary.
That is very scary.
Because you think, you feel like because you're doing God's work, somehow that puts you, I don't know, better than you were before, or better than other people, maybe. And it doesn't. It simply doesn't. Having Christ in your heart makes you a better person. And so, no, you're right. There's a lot of people who have, come. It's been found out later on they were high up in the church. They're very active in the church, doing a lot of church activities, and yet they're abusive to the very people they're supposed to be loving to. And that's a travesty, because that's obviously not what Christ taught us to do.
No. So it all starts at home. And so from there we move on to bigger and bigger places. But if you're interested in being a missionary, if you feel you're ready and you feel you could go somewhere, there are so many places where you could go here in the States. You could be a missionary here in the States and go to different places too. I know there's a lot of places where you could help build a church in construction. There's other places. You could do media. You could do so many things in whatever your talent that God gave you, your gift, you could put to use. But there's also other opportunities out there. We're gonna leave some links in our description.
Oh, perfect. That's great.
In places where you could go and say, maybe I want to do a mission trip for 2 weeks, for a week. That's fine. Or maybe I want to, feel more committed to give a year to the Lord and say, I want to dedicate a year. You could do that too. And you could do it in several aspects. being a teacher, you could do that too. And so if you feel you are ready and you've prayed about this and you want to receive the calling, there are places where you could go to and say, I want to give this to the Lord, to have this experience. Because as we heard, these experiences motivate us a lot. Just hearing you, David, really motivates us like a lot to hear those experiences. And you could have those experiences too. You could be the next testimony out there, and and have that experience. So thank you so much, David, for being with us, for sharing.
It's my pleasure.
For your time. Hopefully this is not the last time you're with us. We want to keep inviting you back to our podcast that now this is It's a Diaz Thing podcast. Just for the people that are hearing us, I just want to remind you that we have so many content out there. We're on Spotify, we are on YouTube, we're on Instagram, and we're also on Facebook. Recently, we added the Facebook feature. So check us out there. We have our Adulting 101 series, our Unveiled series, and we have a lot of there. And Evelyn always is putting out very interesting reels about different topics in our Instagram. So you could follow us there. So let us know. Also, you could follow David on his Facebook. He does really interesting live streams on Friday nights. Sometimes I see them, sometimes I move to Easties, and sometimes I go back to you. The way he plays the piano, if you're into hymns and you just want to have a Friday night and sing it out, just join him there. And Facebook, he's also on YouTube. He has very interesting mission oriented topics there. We stalked you a little bit, David, before we got in here. Awesome. So we got in there and saw some of your content. So yes, thank you so much for joining us, and I guess we'll see each other next time.
All right.
See you guys later.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.